Is that guy the biblical Joseph? Some archaeologists who have a shovel in one hand and the Bible in the other hand claim that this is proof of the Bible because this is Joseph of the Bible who came and became the second in command to the Pharaoh of Egypt. This guy name is Uzzah. His tomb was found in the Valley of the Kings, and it is apparent by his looks as well as other information about him that he was not a normally born Egyptian, that he was a foreigner who came into Egypt, most likely from the Levant. Some theorize that he came from Syria, but it's not exactly sure, but they are definitely sure that he is a foreigner because Uzzah features more Asiatic looks. And one other aspect of it, if you noticed in the first picture, and even in this one, you can barely see it right here, where all other Egyptian mummies were found with their hands over their chest, Uzzah's hands are up near his chin, showing that he was different from the rest of them. So is Uzzah Joseph? Well, no, he's not. Because although they share many similarities, there are some very distinct differences. And if a Christian or Jew were to accept that Uzzah is Joseph, then they would have to then accept that their Bible is in error. The first error that we will be able to easily identify is that according to the Bible, Joseph's body was entombed, just like Uzzah's, in a sarcophagus, but Joseph's body was supposedly moved back to Egypt. Back to the Levant, whereas Uzzah's body was found in the Valley of the Kings. Therefore, your Bible will be in error if you were to accept that Uzzah is Joseph. So what is the most likely case? The most likely case is that the story of Joseph was lifted from the story of Uzzah. You see, Uzzah lived around the late 1400 BCE. He died around 1394 BCE, and around that time frame. He lived to be about 50 years old. So that means that he was more than likely born around 1440, 1450, maybe 1451, 52, 53, somewhere around in that time frame. It is known that he was a foreigner and that he came from the Levant, which is where Joseph came from, the Levant. There are some theories that says that he was a slave. Joseph came in as a slave. He rose to prominence in his home city and became a wealthy noble person in that city. Joseph didn't become wealthy in that sense, but he became the head guy over Potiphar's house. It is said that he then became the counselor, Uzzah became the counselor of Thutmose IV. Joseph became the counselor to the king. One of the attributes of Uzzah is that Thutmose IV had a dream. He didn't understand it. Uzzah interpreted the dream. Uzzah said that Egypt will suffer 7 years of famine if a temple to the cattle goddess is not rebuilt at the mouth of the Nile. Joseph, they saw some cattle fat, cattle lean, said that Egypt would suffer 7 years of famine and 7 years of prosperity. Slight difference, but different. Uzzah also, I don't know if I said this, Uzzah also married an Egyptian woman of nobility and of a priestly line. Joseph married a Egyptian woman of a priestly line. Now, Uzzah's daughter, Queen Tai, became the wife of Thutmose III, the great royal wife of Thutmose III, and then became the grandfather of Akhenaten. We know who Akhenaten is. Started monotheism in Egypt. Now, it is also said that Uzzah, while he was working for Thutmose IV, became the superintendent of cattle, the gentleman who took care of all the king's cattle. We know that in the Bible story, Joseph organized a situation where his brothers would take care of the cattle of the king. And then, as the Egyptians were going through the famine, he pulled the okadoke and had them sell their cattle to the king in order for them to eat. And therefore, his brothers became wealthier and wealthier and wealthier, and they were protected by the king. Yuya doesn't have the brothers involved in the same way, but he does become the main guy to take care of the king's cattle. So as you see, there are many similarities between Yuya and Joseph. There's also some very big differences between Yuya and Joseph as well. We can see that in these two, one can be lifted from the other. The question is, Yuya lived, evidence of Yuya's living, the sarcophagus found. If Joseph was embalmed in a sarcophagus, we should be able to find Joseph's body, but we haven't. We won't. And it's said he was buried in the same place as Abraham. Abraham gave clear instructions as to where he was buried, the land that was purchased, and the terrain that was around it. Why haven't we found the body yet? Makes you wonder. Makes you go, But Yuya's body was found in the Valley of the King. Invalidates the Joseph story. Changes it. Yuya's body is said to have been between the 1440s to the 1494. This is some years earlier than the Joseph story would have taken place. Not a whole lot of years, but some years different. But when is the story written down? When is the story of Joseph really told? Well, first mentionings of the Joseph story, we don't know anything about it until around the 900s to 700s BCE. A good 500 plus years after Yuya existed. So more than likely, the Joseph story was lifted, manipulated to fit the Hebrew people to create what you find in your Old Testament. I hope you found this information to be interesting. It certainly is for me. I've talked about it before. But let's hear your comments. What do you think? Was Yuya Joseph? Or did the Hebrew people borrow the story of Yuya and made it into Joseph? Y'all have a great day. And remember always, you got to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.